Calvary greetings, my viewers all over the world. My name is Juraku Samuel. You're welcome to Volume 3 of our Study Scripture, Lesson 105. The topic we have before us is the charge and portion of the priest and Levite. The charge and portion of the priest and Levite. Our memory verse will be taken from the book of Numbers, chapter 18, verse 5. And they shall keep the charge of the sanctuary and the charge of the altar, that there be no wrath any more upon the children of Israel. Numbers chapter 18 verse 5. And ye shall keep the charge of the sanctuary and the charge of the altar, that there be no wrath any more upon the children of Israel. Numbers chapter 18 verse 5. Our text will be taken from the book of Numbers chapter 18 from verse 1 to 32. Our text will be divided into three sections. The first is from verse 1 to 7, which is actually which deals with the responsibility of the priest and the Levites. Then the next is from verse 8 to 19, which deals with the priest. The contribution belonging to the priest. Then the last part of our text is from verse 20 to 32, which deals with the Levites as the land inheritance and the income of the Levites. Now we need to let's understand them one after the other. From verse 1 to 7, following Korah's attempts to remove Aaron and as the high priest, God reaffirmed Aaron, and his son as the ordained priest. Remember in verse chapter 16, Aaron, Abira, and Dathan, they were kind of they murmured against the leadership of Aaron and Abraham and Moses. So, and of course, God got angry and killed them. So, verse 17, the staff of Aaron stood out of the Lord's staff that was there, that actually proved to them that it's God that appointed him. Now, verse 18, God is that they are affirming their position as the leaders. So not just that, in that from verse 1 to 7, not just were they affirming the Aaron and his sons to take care of the sanctuary, God also gave charge to the Levites, to keep guard outside the tabernacle, so that no any intruder will get into the tabernacle without any due process. So because if anyone actually approached the tabernacle without consultation or without without being qualified, the person is to be put to death. So from verse 8 to 19 is about the the contribution belonging to the priest. God commanded the Levites that tithe to be paid, anything out of the tithes that they were giving among the children of Israel, they are going to pay their tithe to the priest. And not just that, the children of Israel are also going to be pay some tithe to the priest. So God actually had an arrangement for their caring. So a portion of the offering brought to the tabernacle were given by God to the priest. And of course, the priests were to take their portion and eat it with their family. And as they are to eat their own portion with their family, and it has to be in a holy place. And of course, any of the family members that is not qualified, that is unclean, is not expected to partake in whatever benefit that comes from the tabernacle. So God also mentioned the kind of offerings that was to be given to the priest. The wave offerings, the best of oil, the best of wine, everything has to be the best. The first fried fruit offerings, the first fruit offerings, the firstborn of of all clean animals, and of course the unclean one has to be redeemed. The firstborn of unclean animals need to be redeemed. Some amount of money should be paid, and new parents have to redeem their first son, the firstborn, with 5 shekels of silver. 5 silver shekels. So these are some of the things that has to come to the priest. Now from verse 20 to 32 is about the Levites. God actually told the Levites, now of course you already know that Levites did not partake in the inheritance of the land. So the children of Israel are their inheritance. So 10% of whatever they farm should come to the Levites. And of course the Levites are still going to pay their tithes to the priest. So this is actually what the text dealt with. let's go to the outline proper. So after the Lord has, after the Lord has put to rest the rebellion, and the murmuring of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, he also gave Aaron and his sons and the Levite charge regarding the service of the tabernacle of the holy place. So we saw here he gave them duties and responsibility what they are to do, and not just that, the penalty attached to those who actually violate the rules. So who are venturing into ministry without divine appointment and anointing. Now the charge God gave to Aaron and his son and the Levites was to enable them, minister according to their calling and to avoid clash, of responsibilities, which actually is capable of provoking conflict with the priest. So the Levites were actually raised as a support staff, to the Aaronic priesthood. So they were like the workers, the support staff to assist Aaron and his sons in the tabernacle. So God also, stipulated the remuneration that is to come to each of them, the priests and the sons, and of course the Levites, and also the consequence of having people coming into the tabernacle without appointment or without any due process. So we notice here that in our own time, the priests in our own time, they are like the pastors, the leaders, the overseers, the people that are rulers over us, while the Levites are the workers, the support staff, the workers, that are helping the pastors to work. So question number one, who are the equivalent of priests and Levites in the Old Testament? Like I've said, the priests are like our leaders, overseers, the leaders in the church, while the Levites are the workers in all categories in the church. We're going to look at this in three subheading. The first is charge to Aaron and the Levites. So we are looking at from verse 1 to 7. We are Aaron and the Levite, the charge, what God required of them, what the services God required of them pertaining concerning the tabernacle. So two things we're going to see. The number one is strangers denied access into the sanctuary workforce, and supreme divine appointment of leaders and workers. Now we notice here that God actually assigned duties to Aaron and his sons, and of course to the Levites. So the Levite, their responsibility is to ensure that no strangers come into the tabernacle without any invitation or without any legal process. So strangers were not allowed to come to the tabernacle, and in our own time we picture strangers as sinners. So they were not allowed to handle the things of God in the tabernacle. They were not allowed to carry anything in the tabernacle. And of course, we have an instance of someone carrying the things in the tabernacle without qualification, like the Uzziah, who actually wanted to assist the ark of God not to fall, and the ark killed him immediately. So sinners are not allowed, should not be permitted, like the strangers are not allowed to in the sanctuary workforce. That is how sinners in our own time are not equally allowed to handle the things of God, because it will provoke God, and of course it's not rewarding. So question number two, why were strangers not allowed into the sanctuary in the Old Testament, and how can we apply this in the New Testament? Like I've said, because the strangers are not part of the promised plan of God. So they're not part of the promised plan of God. So because of that, they were not allowed to handle the things of God, or come to the sanctuary, or to serve in the sanctuary. The plans of God, the promise of God is actually for the children of Israel, and not for strangers. So strangers are not part of the equation of God. So and that's how it is in our own time. Sinners are not part of the equation of the plan of God. They are not, because the heaven is actually meant for saints and not for sinners. So in our own time, so we are not expected to allow sinners to handle the things of God, because that will really be a desecration to the things of God. Number two, the supreme divine appointment and leader of leaders and workers. We notice here that it was God actually planted Aaron, his sons, and the Levites in the position of leadership there, and not Moses himself. So it was God's plan. And that's one of the reasons why that time Abraham they faced the wrath of God, because they started doubting. They started a kind of murmuring against God's will, and of course they got their own portion of the consequence. So it is God who actually chooses who He wants to appoint to become a leader, and not us. And it's expected that we accept whoever He presents to us as leaders. Of course, it is His sole choice to prefer Jacob above Esau. Yes, even though Esau is the eldest, Jacob was choosing. It was God's choice to choose Joseph above his brothers, even though his brothers there, I suppose they are also the eldest, and God decided to choose Joseph. It is actually the choice of God to choose David above his brothers. So we are not expected to accept whoever He presents to us as leaders, and not to that. So contemporary believers ought to know that God's choice of leaders, among His congregation is not by balloting or by preference or by any sovereignty or any seniority. It's actually based on God's will, God's purpose in life. Leaders are not to allow God appoint workers, in the house of God, and not appointing them based on preferences, based on like or love, based on whatever choice. It has to be based on God's plan, and God should do this. So He is expecting us, to remain faithful wherever He has called us or positioned us in leadership. We're supposed to remain faithful. What can believers learn from God's choice of leaders and workers? What believers should learn, we are to accept whoever that God has presented to us to lead. We're not expected to fight them or doubt them or persecute them. We're just to accept them, and of course God will be praised by so doing. Point number 2, care for ministers in the sanctuary. Care for ministers in the sanctuary. We noticed from verse 8 to 24, it was about the care for the priest. 2 things we're going to see there. Number 1, holiness and perfection, a prerequisite. Number 2, honoring God through our tithe and offering. Holiness and perfection, a prerequisite. So when the portion that was to come to the priest, God actually told them how that should be eaten. It should be eaten in a holy place. It should be eaten in a holy place. It shouldn't be eaten anyhow. And of course, if any of the sons or the children of Aaron is unclean, he's not expected to eat from that holy sacrifice. That is to tell us how the rates that God, the regard that God had for holiness. Of course, without holiness, no man shall see the Lord. And the reason why God, he had to put it that way, because Himself is holy, and of course whoever is going to serve Him must serve Him in holiness and in truth and in holiness. So God required, because of His nature of holiness, He required that we should serve Him in holiness. We should do whatever we are going to do in His vineyard in holiness, and not to do it with an unclean hand. So God also gave them, the offerings of wave offerings, the children, the nature of offerings. He gave them all the best of the things. The priests, so the things that is to come to them, and those things that should be best given to God should be the best out of them all is what God is expecting. So that actually speaks about perfection, the perfect thing. So giving God something that is not clean, something that is not perfect, is not acceptable before God. So question number 4, why and how should believers serve God? One believers are to why is because of the nature of holiness and perfection that God is, and how we are to serve God in holiness and in truth, because that is what God demand from us. Number 2, they are honoring God through our tithe and offering. So God also told the Levites that they are to also pay their tithe and offering to the priest. So they wouldn't say because we are also choosing, so we are now exempted from tithe and offering because we are part of the people serving in the tabernacle. So God required that even the 10% they're going to receive from all children of Israel, out of it they should give 1/10 of it to God. That's to tell us the importance of tithe and offering, and that the importance, so that the people, the ministers will be maintained, the church of God will flourish, the work of God will grow. And these are the reasons why tithe and offering is actually very important. It is a duty of Christian church and believers to maintain their workers and ministers. However, the best reward reserved in heaven for believers who serve God willingly and of course faithfully. There are best reward for them. So the reason why tithe and offering is important is so that the ministers and the workers will be maintained, the house of God will be maintained. Question number 5, give reasons for demanding payment of tithe from the Levites and how is it related to believers today, so that the priest and the household will be maintained, the church of God will be maintained. So God required that so that the house of God, the church of God will be properly managed. Point number 3, contribution of Levites from their portion. Now, from verse 25 to 32 has to do with the Levites. Now, the people of Israel, remember, the Levites they have no land anywhere. It is from the produce of the other 11 that they are fed with. So they were to also be taken care of. So the children of Levi were saddled. So two things we're going to see there. Number 1 is God's provision for the Levite, and number 2, grieving penalty for neglecting tithe. God provided for the Levite he said the Levites should be full-time workers in the tabernacle, and the children of Israel should take care of their needs and their welfare. So we see that God will not saddle us with responsibility without having a plan to take care of us. And one of the things that's one of our hope, in God. So God wanted their attention to be in full service. However, He made provision for their sustenance and welfare while working for Him. So He gave the Levites all the tenth in Israel for an inheritance and for their service, for which they serve in the tabernacle and the congregation. So question number 6 now, why should believers pay tithe and offering? Because it is actually going to be it's going to kind of maintain the full-time workers in the church, the full-time workers in the church like the Levites. It's going to be used to maintain them and get them involved. Because if every of us are working and nobody is there to handle the things of God as a full-time worker, the work of God will die. Because maybe when you have message to preach, you are in the market selling, and the church of God are gathering, there's nobody to take care of it. So we see it is the reason is because the full-time workers in the church will be maintained. Number 2, in a grieving penalty for neglecting tithe. So those that neglect tithe, God sees it as robbery. He said in Malachi, He said you have robbed. He said you have robbed. He said in tithe and what in offering. So God sees the negligence of paying tithe as robbery unto Him. And of course, if for somebody to be a thief, it shows that the person is a sinner. And the consequence of a sinner is hell. So as God demanded giving of tithe by all the children of Israel, at the same time, He still requested same from all the people today. The purpose of tithe and offering is primarily for the flourishing of the house of God and sustenance of His ministers. So the church is actually engaged in evangelical outreach, erection of church buildings, and missionary works. All this requires money, and of course, without money, they cannot be achieved. So that's why, as believers, we should be faithful in paying our tithe and giving generously to the cause of the gospel. Question number 7 now. Mention reasons members of the church should be faithful in paying their tithe and offering, so that the work of God will not die, so that the work of God will not be slowed, will not be not paid attention to, so that the work of God will progress. And I pray God will use you, to promote, to propagate His work, to make sure the works get to flourish in Jesus' name. Thank you for listening.